Hello and welcome back to Studio Essential. My name is Nidhi Chokira and I'm in my second year of an arts law degree. Now I'm joined with Associate Professor Lan Snell from Macquarie's Business School, here to give a presentation about future-proofing yourself. So I'll just chuck it over to you, Lan.
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thanks very much for joining us. So as Nidhi said, I'm Lan Snell. I come from Macquarie Business School. I've been with Macquarie University for just about 2.5 years. I come from UTS Business School prior to that. My role at the moment at the Business School is I look after the Global MBA program, which is a fairly innovative new model in terms of online MBAs. But what we're going to talk about this morning, Nidhi, is not about the Global MBA, although I'd love to talk about that a bit later on. We are going to talk about three main areas in relation to how might we future-proof ourselves.
Right.
So the first one is that we're going to take a peek as to what that future labour market looks like, some of the trends and the characteristics, because they shape and influence hiring expectations. And pay attention, Nidhi, there's going to be an exam for you later on, because this is going to affect you and your future, right?
Sure.
The second thing we're going to look at is how the learning landscape is responding to these market changes. And then finally, what I'm going to do is cap on and take you through what I like to refer to as the EdFlix model. So we know about Netflix, right? So I'm actually calling it not Netflix, but EdFlix. And I'll tell you why at the third point in this session. So I'm going to switch to the slides and take you through. So this slide before you, in fact, should be a bit of an animation, so you'll forgive us for a bit of the technical challenges that we've got this morning, but I know you can appreciate that we've pivoted from what is a face-to-face thing to a completely virtual open day, so I know you can appreciate that challenge. Notwithstanding, this slide in front of you basically takes you through the jobs of the future. So if you actually Google it, here's a fast fact for you. If you Google jobs of the future, you'll probably get about 2.5 million hits, right? Which incidentally, Nidhi, is not far off the number of results if we were to type in, should we wear our face masks? Just goes to show the currency and how topical this question is, right? So these are the job titles of the future. And look, I mean, if we're in a sort of a live mode in that we can transition to see what the other titles are, there are some common denominators here. And that is, all these jobs, without exception, are digital. So what we're looking at is digital literacy is a must, okay? We can also see a number of trends in clusters. So health is, an emerging area. Analytics, look, health is not going to go away anytime soon. We're living in, a very challenging environment. That post-COVID world is not going to go back to what it was pre-COVID. So it has impacted significantly how we work, how we learn, and how we live. And so those three pillars have fundamentally changed everything, including the labour market. So the other sort of trends coming through is learning. Learning is obviously a huge area, and bioanalytics. Food security is also coming through. So if you're interested in terms of what type of jobs are out there in the future, these are the jobs. Here's a funny thing, one of the job titles that I found particularly interesting is, and if not a little disturbing, is called a joy adjunct.
Which is?
Yeah, what is a joy adjunct? Well, get this.
A bit scary.
Be very afraid. This is a job title for an engineer to manufacture or engineer joyful virtual interactions.
So just make us happy?
So, I don't know what that is. We don't know what that is, but it's interesting nevertheless. So I guess the point to this whole exercise is that the takeaway message is digital literacy is a key skill. And that is a fundamental thing for when we consider the jobs of the future and the labour market of the future, which is a silly point because it's actually now. The other thing that I'd like to talk about before we move on to the next slide is the growth sectors or growth careers. I mean, this is another frequently asked question that I get. So the top 10 what would be your guess, Nidhi, as to what is the top 10 sector in terms of growth in the future?
Well, I think my best guess is just IT, like the software development
IT,
sector.
definitely. So anything within the IT. So let's go. Cybersecurity, biotech, anything to do with pharmaceuticals, massive. Healthcare, as we said, robotics and automation. And the whole thing about robotics and automation is that this is how might we create mass personalisation in an authentic way. So that's the next thing there. Agriculture, renewable energy, sustainability, ed tech, this is the learning environment, and digital entertainment. Basically, any prefix before tech is going to work. So let's go. Reg tech, risk tech, biotech, food tech. You get this. You get the semblance of where we're going to here. All right, if we can transition to the next slide. And what we're going to look at here is a really nice summary from IBM. This was produced last year, so it's still very recent, right? This is a very fluid market, so it's almost as if last year information is almost outdated already. But this is how recent it is. So last year IBM released this, and it's interesting because the thing is, Nidhi, you can see within a 2-year framework, a shift in terms of the importance of different skills.
Right.
So now what we're seeing here is within the top 5 skills, we're looking at the replacement of technical skills to that of behavioural skills.
Interesting.
So what they're saying here is that the technical skills are still very important, but them in itself, it's not enough.
Do you mind just quickly explaining the difference between technical and behavioural skills, just for, I guess, my benefit and the audience benefit?
So technical skills are such coding skills, engineering,
so like
a domain of expertise.
Gotcha.
Whereas behavioural skills, and people will often interchange behavioural with soft skills, with transferable skills, enterprise skills, they all mean the same thing.
Gotcha.
And what they track is a set of competencies, if you like. So this includes things such as problem solving, critical thinking, communication, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, etc. And the reason why the importance of soft skills trumping that, and I hate to use that term, over technical skills, even though it doesn't diminish the importance of technical skills, is because the labour market is far too competitive. So welcome to your world, Nidhi. You are in your 2nd year of the Arts Law Combined degree. Awesome degree, by the way.
Thank you.
Another 2 years, you'll be hitting the workforce. You are competing with 10 million other people out there. So what is your point of difference? How are you able to work in a team in a really uncertain environment? Sounds really easy, but human beings, because you're a human being last time I checked, we hate change. We really are change resistant. We say that we're groovy and that we're agile and that we're adaptable.
On the inside, it's just, I'm stuck in my old ways. I feel it right now.
Most people really dislike a change. Because, one of the first questions you'll probably be asking of your academic or your lecturer is, what's a rubric? What do you want me to do? Whereas in a fluid work environment is that here we don't know what that is. We don't know.
So it's always this element of uncertainty,
Uncertainty rules the roost.
That's scary.
Exactly.
That's very scary,
That's right. So that's IBM's. So the takeout message in this slide is that soft skills is the important thing. It's come to the fore.
Interesting.
So we move to the next slide now, and probably my favourite all-time slide. So last year, perhaps the year before. So 2 years ago, I spent a bit of time at Stanford and went to the design school there, and they shared with me, and this is like, again, a whole world away, right? Because so much has changed right now. Notwithstanding, I think some of these trends are still playing through. So I'm going to take you through these 4 quadrants. I'm going to take you through the reason why that environment pre-COVID, all these things were in play pre-COVID. What COVID has done is acted like that blunt instrument that has accelerated digital transformation across the world. So we see these trends in place. So let's go through this. So this is courtesy of Stanford. So this is the research that's come through. The first sort of quadrant there is all about lifelong learning. And we can see that, I mean, you know, that piece of research that was released, I think, last year from the Foundation Australia, suggesting that you, millennials,
Yep.
are going to have at least 17 jobs, you know, in 5 different
Yeah,
careers,
yeah.
etc., etc. And so that whole concept of lifelong jobs
Yeah.
that your mum and dad probably have, that, you know, a different generation has.
Yeah, that we've grown up on as, you know, as millennials, just from our parents' advice and everything as well.
Correct. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going to be a lawyer
Exactly.
when you grow up. Not
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
You know, law is a new black here. Law is a new arts here. You know, so it's a great foundational thing, but you know, you can use it as a basis.
Yeah.
So lifelong employment has been replaced by lifelong learning.
Interesting. I've heard that term used a lot in like the medical sector.
Yeah.
Like the idea that doctors are still, well, constantly just have to learn all these, well, whatever new research is coming up. It's interesting to find that like that lifelong learning concept has now migrated to basically everywhere.
Everything.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? That is simply because the environment, the world we live in, can't keep a pace of the change.
Yeah.
So because of the rapid pace of technology disruptions, we can't keep pace with that. So we need to constantly upskill ourselves.
Right.
Because we are sitting in a university, and the universities are, as great as we are, we're not as agile as what those tech disruptions are.
Yeah.
And so lifelong learning is the fault. We need to constantly upskill. And also because, remember, all these other things are happening in the marketplace. Competition is increasing.
Yeah.
So that thing is very much in the fall.
Interesting. Yeah.
Let's move on from lifelong tricks, and this is about education, the model of education changing. So let's consider you, Nini, because you're a great live case study, right? Okay, so here's the thing. When you entered this world as a baby, as a kid, you know, your questions are, Mum, Dad, why is the sky blue? Why is this? Why is that, right?
Yeah.
And you're naturally
Why
curious.
is God?
Why is God? Well, yeah, maybe, but you know, you're naturally curious, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Out of innocence, you want to understand.
Yes.
But something happens to you, Nitty, along the way. So, you know, that why turns into this almost, as you go through primary school and then in high school, it gets bounded from why to what to almost like a rote learning.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
are you with me here?
Yeah, I can definitely definitely notice that change, yeah.
Such that your HSC was, you know, pretty much of a set thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet, when you transition from your HSC, you come into university, and we ask you to ask the why question again.
Yeah.
We ask you to be curious again.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you've gone from this to this.
Yeah.
And then what happens is that you get your university degree, which is what you're doing right now. And then you go to the big wide world of work. And then you work.
Yeah.
And then you work. And then you work.
Yeah.
And then you die. Right?
Yeah, okay.
So that's the funnel. You're born into this world, you're curious, you go to school, you work, you get your degree, you work, and then you die.
Right.
Well, that is what we call upfront model of learning, because most of your formal education is up at this end.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then majority of your time is spent working.
Yes. Yeah.
And so now that's been disrupted, that whole upfront model of learning.
Yeah.
Because imagine now, fast forward 20, 30 years later on in your career.
Yeah.
If your only formal education is at university,
yeah.
well, the world's changed.
True. And I may be in a completely different career, and I need to be on track with that.
At
or
least
learn
in your
about that.
third, fourth, or fifth career. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
so,
crazy. Yeah.
Hence, that whole upfront model of learning is being disrupted and displaced by lifelong learning.
Okay.
All right? So that's what that second quadrant talks about. And then that third quadrant there talks about an axis flip. So traditionally, when we look at curriculum and a pedagogic development to how we learn and our materials for learning, it's more like a siloed approach. So for example, marketing 101. So I come from a business school, right?
Yeah,
so if you're doing business degrees, like you need to understand the foundations.
And then you go into like specializing.
Marketing,
sort of stuff.
HR, accounting, finance principles. So these are the traditional silos.
Yeah.
Now, just a side note here, organisations have shifted their model from silo-based to that more of a matrix-based organisations,
Interesting. Okay.
where people are not within departments necessarily, but within teams.
Okay. Okay.
So because that world has shifted, we need to shift how we prepare the curriculum as well.
Right.
So what that quadrant suggests is a replacement of those silo components to more foundational soft skills, so capabilities.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's what that looks to, and I think that's a very important shift.
Just real quick to interject with that, I guess that silos point. I still find it hard to, I guess, comprehend that team kind of environment or that matrix kind of system. In these teams, in the work environment, do we still find we have those natural silos that people, like, I guess, specialize in? So one person from a team would be either from like the law department, or another person from the team would be specializing in HR, or do we have that, still that basis silo, I guess?
We have your basis of expertise.
Gotcha.
So your domain expertise.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's your skill set bringing into the team.
Gotcha.
We don't want that four-person team to be all lawyers. Okay, because then that's, it's not really promoting diversity and cognitive difference.
Yeah.
So if I'm picking that team, I want a lawyer, I want a designer, I want an engineer, and I want a scientist.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up to that question is, like, you could have all these different skills in that same environment, but these people could be doing a task that's completely different to what they've studied in university. Is that what you're kind of getting at here?
Foundations, exactly.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's really important to be able to have, as part of the curriculum, foundational areas, capabilities that reflect a bundle of skills. So that is critical thinking, teamwork, cultural intelligence, global intelligence, and the like. So that's what we're talking about here.
Interesting. Yeah.
In fact, just to put the importance of this point is not to be underscored, because what we're looking at is, we call this spot the T spot, which is the sweet spot. So domain expertise plus soft skills are the cross. So it's a finishing school, right?
Yeah.
That has now moved from a T to an X. So we're looking for the X factor. So we're constantly looking for something else.
Right.
And this is because most jobs are going to be automated. So let's even think about your role, or lawyers.
As a lawyer, yeah.
Okay, that traditional trajectory, you finish uni, and then you probably start as a paralegal or something like that.
Yeah.
And most of that work is called research.
Yeah.
But a robot can do that research more accurately, and without any coffee breaks, and will show up to work with no hangover. So
and work 24/7 as well.
Work 24/7.
Yeah.
So that robot is far more effective and cheaper than what you would be. So then, what is your trajectory?
Gotcha. Because there's no starting point anymore.
So it's been really disrupted, this whole thing.
Right.
So that's the whole axis flip. And then we're going to go to I'm conscious of time, to the last quadrant, and that is missions and not majors.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is probably the most inspiring one.
Sure.
Because what this is about, Nidhi, is about pursuing your passion.
Right.
Most people are jaded, hate work, right? Are handcuffed to the organisation because the reality is that they need to pay the rent, the mortgage, feed the kids, etc., etc.
They've always got some sort of extrinsic goal that they need money for.
But is your heart there? Probably not. And so we're talking about productivity here.
Okay.
Imagine if, the pain point for organisations is, how might we attract talent and retain talent?
Right.
And then also to get the best out of them, the productivity yield.
Sure.
The best thing to do that is get them by the head and their heart, and that is about alignment of values. So pursue your passions in life. We know that 80% of all startups out there are in the area of social enterprise and social impact. So that is following your heart. One final thing that I'd like to say before we move on to the perhaps Q&A is that whole EdFlix model. So against that background of all these changes, of the trends as identified by Stanford, of the labour market changes, we have this whole expectation as consumers. You and I, because we're in this crazy COVID world, have binge-watched probably everything on Netflix, And if Netflix is the in-demand model of consumption in terms of entertainment, EdFlix is the same. It borrows heavily off that analogy. This is about in-demand education. I want to learn what I want, when I want, and how much I want. That's what I want to do. That is the EdFlix model of learning. Let's go to questions.
Yeah, sure. So that was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Lan. So if you have any questions whatsoever, make sure you chuck them in the live Q&A chat. Our live Q&A chat well, if you're having trouble with the live Q&A chat, just wait a couple of minutes and try to chuck in a question again. We should be able to get, or our moderators will be able to sort out all your queries in regards to that. If you find that you have a little bit, more specific questions, make sure you put them in the live chat function at the very bottom of our page. Our first question rather is from Katie. And she's asking she's asking about history and archaeology. So she's saying that she wants to get a job in that department, in the history and archaeology department. And she's asking, how can I future-proof a career that's more on the humanities side?
A great question, and I can't pretend to know the answer to all these things, but what I can advise you, Katie, and this is irrespective of your appetite to pursue history or archaeology or whatever that is. Here's the thing, future-proofing is all about looking at the creativity, the originality contribution, because as great as automation is, as great as robotics are, they can't replace human creativity and ingenuity. So in terms of future-proofing yourself, Katie, I would focus your attention on how you work within a team, because whether that is a dig site in Egypt, whatever, in archaeology, you're going to be working with very different people. Here's the labour market, by the way. The millennials for the first time, the labour market is going to consist of 3 different generations of workers, millennials, Gen X, boomers, and so with very different characteristics. So how might you future-proof yourself against working with people who are different generations? This is about being a bit more open-minded, working with, having that sort of cognitive diversity as well. So again, looking at those soft skills.
Is that, in regards to those, soft skills, is it also, a matter of kind of differentiating yourself amongst all the other applicants? So we see kind of the same concept, to bring this back to the HSC. In order to do well in the HSC, you've got to differentiate yourself from all 70,000 other students that are sitting the same exam, learning the same content as you are. So do we see that same concept reflected in the real world?
Absolutely. So this is about cut through.
Right.
So this is now, if we're talking about how might we stand out of the crowd in an HSC response where it's a standard almost given, because you know what that expectation is. If you throw in a line there that is completely left field, that's immediately going to get someone's attention, isn't it? So that's creativity there, right?
True, yeah.
In the same way, let's extend that analogy to professional.
Sure.
What is your professional identity here?
Right.
So now how might we represent our professional identity? Now this manifests itself through things such as LinkedIn. Okay. What does your LinkedIn profile say about you? Right. When I ask you about you, what can you bring as a professional, what are you going to say? What is your elevator pitch on this one? So this is your opportunity to differentiate yourself. So the more creative you are without being, cringy.
As many people are.
We don't want to be awkward about this, but we do want to be professional, and we do want to have an element there that differentiates you from your competition.
Gotcha. We also have another question that's just coming in. The question asks, how does Macquarie ensure its curriculum is keeping up with, university trends and the outside world?
My all-time favourite question, and also something that I get asked on a frequent basis. What I love about Macquarie Business School, Macquarie University, is that we work very closely with industry. Because here's the thing, as important as you are as a student, our key and favourite stakeholder group is our students. But in fact, our students, you consume our service.
True, yes.
The end buyer here is not you, it's actually the employer.
Gotcha.
So that is why it is so important for us to co-create any new curriculum with industry.
I guess that kind of explains the whole professional and community engagement program, the PACE program that Macquarie runs as well. It's all about getting you that industry experience, showcasing Macquarie students to our potential employers and making sure that we're, a shoe-in to that company when the time comes.
That's right. I mean, from an industry's perspective, they get a really good overview of the talent that is available. So that's why they want to work closely with universities. By the way, we all have a mutual obligation here. This is not about the universities doing all the work here. This is about us coming together to co-create that experience, because it's in our both vested interest to make sure that we're producing graduates that are capable of that workforce of the future.
Yeah, wow, okay. Interesting. We have another question as well. it's about the role of universities. So where do you see the role of universities in the future?
I see us, our mandate, we need to pivot like every other organisation out here. We're entering very challenging times.
Yeah.
And that calls for reinvention and re-engineering of what we do. So this is all about making sure we not only service, but anticipate what that future consumption looks like.
Gotcha.
For our students who straddle a huge pipeline of different expectations, this means we need to offer different shapes and sizes of learning.
Right.
To cater for that lifelong learning appetite.
Gotcha. And you mentioned like the challenges that this current situation has had upon, I guess, learning and the more permanent changes that the COVID pandemic has had upon, I guess, just how universities teach. Do you mind expanding a bit upon that matter in regards to, I guess, the impacts of COVID and what the roles of universities are in terms of all of that?
So, here's the thing. Universities are not the most agile creatures, but what we have done, and done spectacularly well in response to COVID, is within 3 months almost, we have basically lifted and shifted a lot of our delivery from face-to-face to online model. Right?
Yeah.
So that everyone has done that
Yes.
in the sector. So I think universities have responded remarkably well, as have schools, as has the whole world to this. But how might that look like in a sustainable way? Well, this is about not just the lift and shift model, but in fact purposely built pedagogy to optimise that learning experience online. So I think that is a role and the challenge, really, quite frankly, for universities for the future.
Okay, I think that that pretty much sums up our time for this segment. It's been really great to have you, Lan. Thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you so much for answering all the questions that students have. In terms of what's coming up next, we actually have a session with one of our really successful alumni that's on center stage. In terms of what's running on the other stages, the arts stage is running a session on linguistics and languages. On the education stage, we have a presentation about primary education, and the law stage is running a law presentation as well. So besides that, make sure you're keeping up with all of our competitions. We have a See Yourself at Macquarie competition and the other competitions as well. And make sure you keep asking those questions in the live chat bubble at the very bottom of your page. Apart from that, that's me and Lan and I signing off for now. See you guys soon.
Thank you very much.